Okay, so we're streaming.
Wait, I just drank my water. I went down the wrong pipe. Hold on. All right, wait. Wow, it's amazing how water will do that. Never happens with wine. But water, I definitely have issues with.
This is why you should drink wine.
Yeah, I'm not in the water business. Okay.
No. I think we talked about that before. So, welcome to the third season of the Way to Wow show that we've subtitled "How People Make Money." So this season, we're going to be talking to a number of people, like my guest today, who have found remarkable ways to make a living. And, with the way the job market is these days and the way business is these days, I think a lot of people have kind of taken stock during the last year and a half or 2 years and decided, do I really want to continue doing what I'm doing professionally? I'm going to have a guest on at one point who worked for a law office for years and years and years and just decided, I don't want to be doing this anymore. And so he changed his path. So we're going to be talking about that once a week. We'll be live, and you'll be able to join the meeting, or you can join it streaming on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube Live, as well as I think we're on LinkedIn Live as well. And you can put questions and comments in the chat, and we will respond to them. So with that as an introduction, I want to quickly move on and talk to our guest. So Jeff Morgan is the founding winemaker and co-owner, I think at this point with your wife, Jody, right?
Yes.
Of Covenant Wines. And they're based in Berkeley, California. So Northern California. And in my estimation, Jeff is the premier kosher winemaker in the world. If you've had Covenant Wines or one of the other labels that Jeff and his crew make, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm going to kind of primp him a little bit because I really want Jeff to tell his story. But for those of you who are used to kosher wine of 40, 50 years ago, aka Manischewitz, which, is really just, cough syrup with a lower alcohol content. This is not kosher wine today, and this is certainly not Covenant kosher wine. And I think the sign of that is not so much the wine ratings, but the fact that many non-kosher restaurants serve Jeff's wine. So he's really at the top of the wine business. Many fine restaurants, including several in New York, I believe. Is that not right?
Yes,
and around the world.
But probably the most famous restaurant that we're in is the French Laundry, which is in Napa Valley, California.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. The infamous French Laundry, unfortunately, in some circles. But anyway, and so Jeff and I have been friends for a while now. And interestingly enough, he started his professional life as a jazz musician. And so one of the reasons I wanted Jeff to be the premier guest on season 3 is he can talk directly about this idea of starting in one place professionally and moving through almost a series of professional endeavors and ending up doing something that he really deeply loves. And I would argue too, is doing a tremendous amount of good, here in the world. I can tell you that Covenant Wines got me through the last couple of years. So without further ado, Jeff Morgan, coming from somewhere in the Caribbean, right?
Yes, I'm currently on the island of Virgin Gorda, which is in the country of Tortola, British Virgin Islands. My wife and I got married here 34 years ago at my mother-in-law's house, and we're visiting my mother-in-law to celebrate that 34 years of marital bliss. And by the way, I want to thank you for that generous introduction, Kevin. I just wanted to let your listeners know that we have a winery in Berkeley, California. That's our main winery, but we also make wine in Israel. And our Israeli wine is called Covenant Israel. And we've been making wine in Israel since 2013. So we've been there almost a decade as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Excellent.
Can
So
I add? Can I
tell
add
us
something? Wait, can I?
Oh,
Can I?
please.
Allow me to interrupt? I'm Jewish, and
Yes.
so because you were talking about maybe changing careers or how COVID has given us perhaps time to not be as active on the outside, perhaps be a little more internal in terms of our reflection. And I think that if there's one thread in my own professional life, it's that I've never done anything professionally that I didn't want to do. So I wanted to be a musician when I was a teenager, and eventually I became a musician, and I was a professional musician for 15 years until one day I realized I was more, and I was in France working in Monte Carlo. I was the band leader for the King of Monaco's house band, and that was circa 1987. And had a great band, but I found I was more interested in what I was drinking after the gig than what I was playing during the gig. So I thought, I love wine. Maybe I should just be a winemaker. And the other sax player got the gig with the Rolling Stones anyway. So, it was like, what am I going to do now? So I think what I want to share with your listeners throughout this podcast is the importance of following your heart, following your nose, following your brain, following your personal muse, whatever that might be, because you can do whatever you want. Figuring out how to do it is not so easy, but not doing what you want, if you're lucky enough to know what you want, and that's probably the most important element of this discussion, is, in my opinion, a tragedy, a personal tragedy. You may not succeed, but if you don't try, you definitely won't succeed.
So, right before we came on, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's actually the fellow who recruited me into the Navy. And after he got off active duty, he decided he wanted to go into robotics, actually kind of in the biomedical field. And he was telling me that he was with one startup, and they did okay, and then his wife got pregnant, and so he made the absolutely sensible decision of immediately turning around and doing another startup, right? But it's where his heart was, and that company got acquired by a larger company. So it was a lot of hard work, and it was not easy. But I think because he really wanted to do what he did, it gave him the perseverance to continue on this path that eventually led to him hitting. Look, he's 2 for 2 on startups. I don't think there's too many entrepreneurs who can claim that kind of record. Maybe Elon Musk or somebody like that. So I'm going to have you back up a little bit, because I think some people will be interested to hear this. How did you become the band leader for the Prince of Monaco? I mean, to become successful as a musician is, I think, a dream of a lot of people. What do you think were the elements of the elements to your success that allowed you to get to that point? And that's an impressive accomplishment.
Well, we have a word in Yiddish. It's chutzpah, and if you don't know what chutzpah means, it means, I guess, having balls. Okay, daring to go where maybe other people wouldn't dare go, or maybe just throwing caution to the winds and saying, I'm gonna go for this. And the Monte Carlo gig happened after I'd been, when I was 19, very briefly, I dropped out of college so I could go study in the French National Conservatory system in Nice for a year. Well, I stayed for 5 years, and I was classical flutist, and I picked up the saxophone and moved back to New York. And I was playing in New York, a lot of gigs. I'm making pretty good money. But I was working a lot with one of my best, actually, probably my best friend in the world, Mr. Frank Amsalem, who is now a very famous French jazz pianist. We both were in conservatory together back in the 70s in Nice. He moved to New York. We were working together. And one day Frank says to me, you know, Jeff, there's a really good gig in Monte Carlo. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I think that I've worked in the band there. They're always looking for something American. But if I call them, they won't talk to me because I'm French. You call them, you speak French, and they listen to you. So in those days, we didn't have cell phones. This is 1986. No cell phones, no nothing. I spent a lot of money on that long distance call to the artistic director of the casino, the Grand Casino in Monte Carlo, which belongs to the royal family. But I knew the name of the person I was looking for, and I speak pretty good French. So I said, you know, you don't know me, I'm Jeff Morgan. I have this great band in New York. Are you interested in hiring a band from New York? And he said, oh, as a matter of fact, I'll be in New York in 2 weeks. Maybe you want to audition. So I said, great. We made the arrangements. I hung up the phone and I said, okay, Frank, we better put a band together. We had nothing.
That's chutzpah.
Yeah. So, you know, it wasn't so easy. He came, we did the audition. We had a 20-piece band. We had all the arrangements. We sounded great. And, you know, Bernard Lyon, the artistic director, who was actually a jazz impresario in Paris, also very well known.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had a great band. I mean, they're all like great musicians and famous recording artists, whatever. He goes, you know, I don't think this is what I'm looking for. And I go, what? Don't you have something that's a little more, you know, lively? Because we had like a swing band. We thought it was. So I said,
does it get
well,
livelier
okay.
than that?
All right. We can do that, I said, but it was too late. You know, so very quickly, I would often go back to France in the summertime to visit my friends there. I'd lived there for 5 years. I'm a French wannabe, and Jody, my wife, and I would always go back to Monte Carlo because we were in Nice. Monte Carlo is like a whopping 12 kilometers away, and we'd go visit Bernard at the casino. We'd hang out. We became friends. And when he would come to New York looking for talent, we would get together in New York, and it was very nice. And eventually, about 2 years later, we're in Monte Carlo, listening to one of the bands at the casino, and I say, Bernard, when are you going to hire my band? And he goes, well, you're going to have to give me what I want. And I said, well, what do you want? And he said, I want something a little more lively. But by then I knew what they wanted. So we did it again. Wow. And I don't know how Vanessa got on this, but we're going to have to get rid of her.
Yeah, let me get rid of her.
Yeah. We didn't do that one in Monte Carlo. Anyway, so we did I knew what he wanted. He came to New York, and it was great. And we got the gig. We went to Monte Carlo, and we were there for 4 or 5 months. And then that was when I had my epiphany that I really was more interested in what I was drinking than what I was playing. So we came back. Speaking of your friend whose wife was got pregnant. Well, Jody got pregnant. I decided I wanted to be a winemaker, and the whole family on both sides said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're making a good living as a musician. Why do you?" I said, "This is what I want to do." So Jody likes to say that I have the dreams, and she supports the dreams and helps make it possible. And I do have to say that, in all deference to my wife or anybody who has a supportive partner, it's very helpful, because it's hard to do this stuff all alone. But when you have somebody who believes in you, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if I recall, in between being a jazz musician and being a winemaker, weren't you also a wine journalist?
Well, so what happened was we came back to came back from France, and I kept playing for another 5 years because I was making pretty good money as a musician, but I found a job in a little winery in Long Island, New York, where I made $7 an hour, and I would make way more than that playing music. So I was kind of going to the city on the weekends playing, and then living out on Long Island. And after a few years, I was exhausted. I mean, I had a 5.5 day job making wine, not kosher wine, by the way, just wine. And I learned a lot. And I was also working really hard as a musician. And I quit the winery, and Jody, who has all my best ideas, said, why don't you, be a wine writer? You always are complaining about, wine writers who don't know anything about wine, writing about wine. And so I said, yeah, I can do that because, of course, as we both know, ignorance is bliss. And, and so I started writing for a local newspaper in the wine country where we lived. I started writing obits, and that was a great education. It really was. It's a great way to learn how to write. And then I wrote a little column on wine, and eventually I worked my way into the New York Times. That's just one of those lucky things. I heard they were looking for a stringer. That's a part-time writer who will write for almost nothing and write long articles that hopefully will actually make sense. And I wrote a long piece on Long Island wines for the New York Times. I wrote a couple of other pieces for them also. And one of the editors of Wine Spectator saw my byline and knew me because we had gotten pretty good scores and reviews for the wines I'd helped make in Long Island earlier. So he called me and he said, hey, are you the same Jeff Morgan we knew who was making wine? And I said, yeah. He said, well, we didn't know you were a writer. And I said, well, when you met me 2 years ago, I wasn't, but now I am. And they said, great, we have a story for you. And I said, really? What kind of a story? And they said, well, we want you to write about kosher wine for Passover. And I was quiet. And then I said, you're kidding, right? And I laughed. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I've never had a good kosher wine. In fact, I've never had much wine at all that's kosher. And I don't know anything about kosher wine or kosher anything. In fact, I wasn't even bar mitzvah. And they said, but you're Jewish, right? Because 30 years ago, people could say that and they wouldn't get arrested. So I said, yeah, I'm Jewish, but like no Jewish education, nothing. I don't know anything. So they said, well, fine. We just want to make sure you're Jewish because last year, the guy who wrote this article was not Jewish and he gave the wines bad reviews and we were accused of anti-Semitism. So this year you can say what you want, but you're Jewish, we're safe, and, knock yourself out. This is your foot in the door, Morgan. And he was right. So that was the former managing editor of Wine Spectator, Thomas Matthews, who is still with the magazine, but not in that position. And apparently they liked this story. It was a 5-page spread on kosher wine. I did a lot of quick research, a lot of photographs, and they let me write other articles about other things in addition to kosher wine. And 3 years later, they asked me if I wanted to be the West Coast editor in the San Francisco office. So we moved out there in 1995, and I was there until just about 2000 when I decided I just wanted to make wine again. I was tired of writing articles about wine. And so we moved to Napa Valley and I started a little wine company called Solo Rosa. I was the only winemaker I knew that was stupid enough to only make rosé back in those days when nobody wanted rosé. It's tough to be a leader, a trendsetter, because yeah. So we lasted about 8 years, but then there was so much competition that we either had to grow big or get out of town. But meanwhile, I tasted in 2002 a really great Israeli wine when we were living in Napa Valley, a Domaine du Castel, with Eli Ben Zaken, who is the founding winemaker and owner at Castel in the Judean Hills. Loved the wine, and I was tasting it with a number of other Jewish winemakers in Napa, and we all agreed it's fantastic. And one of them, a guy named Leslie Rudd, who had a very famous winery called Rudd, R-U-D-D winery in Napa, said to me, wow, like that's better than Manischewitz that I grew up with. And I said, yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. And I had written about kosher wine for 8 years for the Wine Spectator. So I knew that essentially kosher wine was there is no kosher winemaking protocol. You can have really good kosher wine, you can have really bad kosher wine, and it really depends on, who makes it and how they make it. But there's no requirement like boiling it or any particular ingredients. The only requirement is that someone who is Sabbath observant touch the juice or the wine. Even the grapes can be handled by anybody. So anyway, we decided that we were going to try to make a kosher wine from Napa Valley that was as good as the Israeli Castel. And that was the beginning of Covenant. Our first vintage was 2003. And by the way, don't try this at home because you need a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money. That's the one thing I forgot to mention in my Follow Your Muse speech there. If you need a lot of money, look for the money first. Because if you find your muse and you don't have the money to follow up and do what you want to do, you're just going to get frustrated. So Leslie was a fairly successful businessman and a nice Jewish boy from Wichita who loved wine and loved Jewish culture and our Jewish heritage. And so Les had the capital to lend to the business when we got started. And so we were able to start. It's very expensive to make Napa Valley Cabernet. If you're wondering maybe why it costs so much, it's because it costs a lot to make it. And we were able to get started with 500 cases of wine. Now we make 8,000 cases of wine in Berkeley, and we make another 2,000 in Israel. So we've grown. But without Les, I never would have been able to start this program.
So I want to back up just a little bit. When you were talking about getting into writing, and you said, well, you lucked out. Do you think?
Did I say that? I said I lucked out?
Yeah.
I said I lucked out?
Or you got lucky. So do you think it was really luck, or was it, a combination of I don't know, for want of a better term, personality traits, being involved with the business, taking the out, because I think a lot of us think about, I see this with a lot of lawyers, by the way. So lawyers, successful lawyers doing well, they want to move into something else, but it means a huge pay cut. And it sounds to me like you were willing to take that pay cut in order to make that transition in your career. And that's not an easy thing to do. It takes some guts, right? And like you said, it takes a family that will support you. So, I mean, were there discussions about that? And likewise writing. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to write, but especially these days, you can write for free forever and never get paid, right? So, how did you come to terms with those issues that allowed you to make those changes?
Well, first of all, when I say I got lucky, there's another cliched phrase that says you make your own luck, and you do. Or if you're going to get lucky, you need to be in the right place at the right time with the goods to deliver, because otherwise you're not going to be lucky. So that's one thing, and I think I've been ready for the opportunities that have arisen, whether I knew it or not. I've been ready. In terms of your lawyer friend, I know a lot of successful lawyers who are really unhappy. I don't know one successful lawyer who's really happy, but I know gobs of them who would trade places with me if they could still make the money they make as successful lawyers. So therein lies the rub. If you're driven by money, or if money is that important to you or your lifestyle, or maybe your needs, I don't know, maybe you got 6 kids and they're all going to like Harvard, so you need some money. But I think you should stick with the day job. But personally, I'm not driven by money. Yes, I need money. I like making money. I want to make as much money as I can, but that's not the driving force behind anything I do. I'm driven by the desire to create something beautiful, something I believe in, whether it's music or wine or books. My wife and I have actually written 10 cookbooks also. So we're, I like to call ourselves serial cookbook authors, and we've done well with the cookbooks too. So I think if you have a passion for something that you can at least make a living at, potentially, should follow that passion. I didn't take a salary at Covenant for 10 years, but I had to make money. I had 2 kids in college. So what do? We did other things. I made wine for other wineries. I was a consulting winemaker. I was the winemaker for another winery. And Jody and I wrote 10 books in 15 years, actually, that also helped pay the bills. And so, you got to find ways to make the money to do what you want. But like I said, if money is the end, if you're really passionate about making money, well, then do whatever it takes to make the money. I mean, I'm not going to criticize you for that. That's fine too. If you love making money, it's very exciting. I mean, my late partner, Leslie Rudd, who had the Rudd Winery, and he was a very successful businessman. What he really loved was making a deal. I mean, that's when he really lit up. Okay. That was his thing. And he was great at it. And he became a very wealthy man because of it. I don't have that talent. I mean, I just don't. And, but it's not where I'm driven. So really, I think it's be true to yourself, follow your muse. Don't be afraid, or don't be afraid of being afraid, actually. I mean, I'm always terrified. I wake up, I'm the most courageous man I know because I'm terrified all the time. And I still go and, go the distance. I do have a quick story to tell you. Can I tell you one more story?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm sorry. I can't help myself because I spent my whole life trying to figure out how to do it. But there is one important story I have to share with you. And that is when I was, it wasn't quite so easy to become a wine writer as, I get the call from the Wine Spectator. So I was in the olden days, before Instagram, before all of the new age of writing, and you're right, the world has changed, Kevin. I mean, it's a different world for writers, but I couldn't get arrested. I mean, I had a lot to say, but nobody was listening. And I had an uncle in New York who was the editor of the Village Voice, and he was also a pretty well-known in publishing circles. And I went to see Uncle Tom, and I said, Uncle Tom, I can't get arrested. All my articles are getting rejected. I don't know what to do. And he said, I can't help you with this, Jeff. I don't know anything about wine or food. I do know about publishing, and I do know about getting ahead in life. And I can tell you that it's very simple. You have to go to the right parties. And I said, well, how do I get invited to the right parties? He said, I can't tell you that either. But at the right parties, you're going to meet the people who will open the doors to where it is you want to go. So somehow I got invited to a party that probably changed my life. It was it was at the James Beard Foundation. I was writing a little bit for the local newspapers and whatnot in Long Island, and got invited to a dinner with some famous chef, and there were all these people there, and they sat me down at the press table, and I was sitting next to a lovely young woman whose name I believe was Emily. And I said, I'm Jeff Morgan. And she said, hi, I'm Emily, whatever my last name is. And I said, well, what do you do? And she said, I'm the food editor for Elle magazine. And I said, really? Well, she said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a wine writer. And she goes, well, that's funny. We're looking for a wine writer. We're looking for a wine writer. She says at Elle. And I said, well, that's great. Where do I apply? And she said, well, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, my editor, the managing editor. I said, what's wrong? She's French. And I said, she's French. What part of France is she from? She's from Nice. Now, Nice is where I lived for 5 years. Nice is where I learned everything I know about living. Nice was my, especially back then, Nice was my second home. And so I said, well, why don't you arrange for an interview, and we'll see how it goes. So she said, okay. So next week, she's got me in the 2:00 slot. I go up to the office in Manhattan, and sure enough, she's there, the editor, and she looks at me sternly, and she goes, okay, who are you? What do you want? I said to her, bonjour. And she goes, wait a minute, you speak French? I said, yeah, I speak French, educated in France, lived in Nice, blah, blah, blah. She goes, we shared the 5-minute, requisite chit chat. And then she goes, okay, what's the best place to get la soca in Nice? Now, la soca is the traditional Niçois crepe made with chickpea flour. And the best soca I happened to know in Nice at the time was at Chez People by the port near where I used to live and where I used to go all the time for my soca with a little wine. And so I said, of course, it's Chez People. And she goes, you have the job. She never said, let me see your writing. She never said, do you know anything about wine? She never said anything. She said, you know people soca, you got the job. And so that was actually sometime around when I was also getting into the New York Times. That was really my first exciting major international gig. So, you never know. You just build on your life experiences. Now, I'm sorry, I've interrupted you many times. I'm going to let you talk. Go for it, Kevin.
So the point of this is for you to do as much of the talking as possible. So it's perfectly fine for you to interrupt me. You mentioned that you were prepared for the opportunities that came your way. How intentional was that preparation, and how did you? I mean, you told the story about your, I think it was your uncle who's who in publishing. How did you learn what you needed to do to prepare to enter these new fields?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. And I have one quick anecdote to tell before I answer more fully. So my father, who died 3 years ago at the ripe old age of 95, had a very interesting life. And one day, a few years before he died, he said to me, Jeff, looking forward, nothing made sense. But today, looking backward, it all fits together. And I think he was right. I think most of the preparation is unintentional because you don't know what life's going to throw you. You don't know what kind of curveballs you're going to get. You don't know what kind of opportunities you're going to get. So I think perhaps the most important thing is to pursue excellence in whatever your interest is or whatever your interests are. I mean, I want to be a musician, so I practiced a lot and I became a pretty good musician. I don't think I'm not a genius, and I did okay, but I think when I realized I had kind of hit the ceiling for what my abilities were, and I was pretty good, and I still play, but I thought, well, maybe I should try something that I love equally, that maybe there's more opportunity for me as. And I didn't know I was going to actually become a very well-known wine writer at the time and a well-known winemaker. I didn't know I could even make wine. I just knew I could drink it. But looking back, as my father would say, everything I've done has prepared me for what I'm doing right now, sitting here talking to you.
Do you think that the experiences you've had in your life, the things you've learned, have you had to, in essence, kind of repurpose them as you've grown and changed your professional outlook over the years? You know what I'm saying? I used to work with people coming out of the military, for example. So military life, on the face of it, seems so different than civilian life. But in reality, a lot of the stuff we do is not so different. It goes by different names or whatever. But a lot of the things that we did in the military, they have tremendous applicability in civilian life. But there's got to be kind of a perspective shift in order to see them in that new context. So was anything like that part of what you had to do? And I don't know, is this question making sense?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a good lead into to something I think is really important for anybody who's either wants to make a career change or somebody who's just pursuing a career. I think you have to be prepared to be flexible and not adhere to some fixed or rigid vision regarding what it is you want to become or what it is you want to do. I mean, talking about, I do make some pretty good kosher wine, but that was never my original goal. I was not educated. I have no Jewish education, or at least I didn't growing up. I kind of realized as we tasted that Israeli Castell wine, I realized that, okay, it's pretty good. But when Leslie Rudd said, maybe we can make a really good kosher wine from Napa Valley, I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to make kosher wine. That's the last thing in the world. So we actually spent about a year talking and arguing about this. And then when he said, and you're not going to make any money until the business is profitable, I really didn't want to do it. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was probably never going to get the capital together to create that Napa Valley Cabernet in the sky that I wanted to do. I knew I could do it the way I wanted to do it: native yeast, unfiltered, unfined, just like all the great Cabernets from Napa that many of them, not all of them are made that way, but and I thought, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to make it kosher. And so I think there are ancillary benefits if you're flexible. For example, okay, I had a business partner who could help us get started. But as you know, Kevin, I also was able to reconnect or connect with the Jewish community in a way that I hadn't experienced prior to making Covenant. And this has been a beautiful thing. I had to work with more religious Jews in the cellar at Herzog Winery down in the Central Coast. And I did that for 5 years until I was able to kind of work out how to do it myself with just one other assistant, who's now my winemaker, at Covenant, California, Jonathan Haydu. And, I being around observant Jews, I realized I had missed some pretty serious connection, which was ironic since my winery was called Covenant. I had missed the connection with our Jewish culture and our Jewish heritage that I wanted to pursue, as well as the goal of making a great wine that happened to be kosher. So, as you know, as a result, I was inspired to go to Israel in 2011. When I got there, I realized I needed to make wine in Israel because I felt really at home there. And of course, I actually, at the age of 60, found it in myself to join a synagogue, and I joined a modern Orthodox synagogue, which is really kind of surprising to everybody, including myself. Finally got bar mitzvahed only 50 years late at the age of 63. And, one of my daughters, Zoe, made Aliyah 8 or 9 years ago, married an Israeli guy whose name is Guy. We have a much more powerful connection to our Jewish roots as a result of this winemaking thing. So I like to say that wine brought me back to Judaism.
So most of you can probably see this graphic over my shoulder. So this is the 3 pillars of attainment, and we're operating right here in the finances realm. But if you think about it, any of these realms can expand our lives into other realms of our lives. So this is the spiritual pillar up here: identity, family, God, right? It sounds to me like your professional journey, I think this is true for many people perhaps, it doesn't stay confined, to its one little niche, right? It expands itself into other areas of our lives.
Well, yes, I would say that, and now that I'm 68, it's occurred to me that everything is connected and that everything is one. And this may be a Jewish concept or a Buddhist concept, or I don't know what concept, but it seems to be the way things are. And quite frankly, we were supposed to talk about, making money on this show. We haven't done too much about that. I can tell you that, I've had good years and less good years. I can tell you, 35 years ago, I was a street musician in New York making, $2,000 a year. So I've been like at the bottom of the financial pyramid. And after 20 years of, 20, maybe more than that, almost 25 years making wine, we figured out how to make wine that people really love to drink because they value the quality we have in our bottle. We've identified certain markets, obviously, if it's kosher wine. So the religious communities around the world, Jewish religious communities, certainly appreciate our wine. But we've also, you can find our wines in Tokyo. We sell a lot of Covenant in Tokyo, and they never even asked me if it was kosher. It's kind of a non-issue. In Taiwan, we sell our wines also. I don't know if it's an issue in Mexico or Brazil or Canada or many of the other Europe where we sell our wines. I tend to think that a large percentage of our niche market is in the Jewish and probably religious community. So that's great. But we also are growing, and we're certainly establishing a beachhead in just what I call the normal wine front. I did taste for 8 years the greatest wines in the world as a reviewer at the Wine Spectator. That was a great privilege for me. And what I'm trying to do now, and I think sometimes we do succeed, is to make wines as good as my favorite wines that I had the privilege of tasting as a world wine reviewer. It's very rewarding to me to know that people appreciate what we do and will pay up to $200 a bottle for a great Napa Cabernet. But I realize everybody can't pay that. And we also make about 25 different wines, and we also make some terrific wines that cost 20 or 22 bucks. So it's what the wines cost, and people often ask me that. Well, why is this one $20 and why is this one $200? Well, sometimes it costs me 10. It cost me 10 times as much to make that Napa Cabernet, and I make very little of it. So the $22 Zinfandel from Lodi is much less expensive for me to produce, and therefore I can pass those savings on to the consumer. It doesn't make it a less good wine, but it's different. It's kind of apples and oranges.
Yeah. So that's a good segue. I have some of your wines here, and I feel like we should show folks some of what you've made. So you were talking about your great Napa Valley Cabernet. So this is a Solomon Lot 70. This is a 2017, I think. And this is kind of a legacy of your first wine, is it not?
Yeah, the 2017, I believe, was the Solomon is usually is always our best Cabernet and the best barrels, and that it doesn't necessarily come from one vineyard. But I think that was the last year that we made wine from Leslie's vineyard, not exclusively, but there's a lot of Rudd in there. And it's that wine now costs, if you buy the 2019 or 2018, which is what we have for sale now, it's costs $200. That one would cost you more. So it's good that you bought it then. We don't have any more, so you can't buy it anymore anyway. So it's collector's item. Yes. Open it with a good friend.
So, and then this is the Chardonnay Lavon. This is also Covenant. This is a 2017 as well.
That comes from a single vineyard on Sonoma Mountain. It's a beautiful vineyard, 100% Chardonnay. That's a $42 wine. So not nearly as expensive as the $200 Napa Cabernet.
Now,
equally good in its own way.
Yeah. I realize I'm out of your sparkler. Is this the base for your sparkler, or is it a different Chardonnay?
It's a different Chardonnay base for the Covenant, the Cuvée Blanc de Blanc Chardonnay. And
then you'll notice this one has the top off because this is the bottle I polished off last night at dinner. This is the Tribe Proprietary Red. So this is another label for you, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I can't help myself. I keep coming up with very Jewishy labels. My marketing team keeps telling me that if I want to get out, I want to expand our horizons, I got to stop doing Jewy stuff. But I'm sorry, I can't. So the tribe, obviously, we have the tribe, we have covenant, we have the Red Sea. The Red Sea is actually just a Red Sea. It's a play on words, but it's perfect Passover wine. What's that?
So this
one?
is
That's
part of your wine club.
yeah.
This is, I think these are the Landsman is your wine club wine, right?
Yeah, Landsman wines. We make 3 different wines under this Landsman label. Landsman, of course, means a people or a person who shares a community, culture, a geographic origin with other people of a similar culture. And so in Yiddish, a Landsman is a Jew. In Polish, a Landsman is a Pole. In German, a Landsman is a fellow German, but we're using the Yiddish here, but that doesn't mean, but whatever. Anyway, we make Landsman Syrah, Landsman Pinot Noir, and Landsman Cabernet Franc just for our club members.
Right. And I've actually got one like a field blend, I think it is. That's from a few years ago, no?
That's from a few, yeah. We were doing a field blend, which was just various grapes from the same vineyard that we picked at the same time. Okay, here's another Jewy name. This is Neshama, which means Neshama, which
soul.
Means soul. Yeah, whether you're Jewish or not, you got a Neshama. So that's also our best not Napa Cabernet. So it's our best barrels of not Cabernet from not Napa.
Okay. Yeah, this is 2016 proprietary red. This is a Petit Verdot, Malbec, and Syrah. So
exactly.
that's a nice blend.
That's a good
and
one.
Then you mentioned you have a winery, or you make wine in Israel as well. So this is, I think, this is the Covenant Israel, right?
Well, so that's our second vintage. That's the 2014 Covenant Israel Syrah. It's a delicious wine, by the way. And I was, pretty gung ho when I started this project, and I said, well, let's just slap the map of Israel on this label, and it's obviously Covenant Israel is the name of the brand. We write it out on the back of the label, but here it's obvious to me. So I thought this was a great idea, and so did a lot of people. But politics are complicated, especially in Israel. And for those of you who know or care, you'll see that they didn't really cut the West Bank, or the territories, as we say, out of this map. So this is what I would call my idea of what Israel is today. But I got a lot of flack, oddly enough, in Israel, not so much here in America. And the political discussions about whether this was a good thing or a bad thing became more important than the wine. So in 2015, we changed that label. That's a serious collector's item, Kevin, and you should hold on to it.
And I guess this is, unfortunately, this label is a little bit damaged, but this is the current.
No, that's the Blue Sea from Israel. But no, that's not what we have that's our kind of our $40 wine. The Covenant with the map, that's a $75 wine, and then we have a more expensive Cabernet also. It's a more abstract, classy thing that nobody knows what it is, and we know. So, but since we changed the label, we've been much more successful with everybody as opposed to just those who have a certain political bent. And that's really, wine for me is something that's supposed to bring us together, not drive us apart. So I just didn't think of it when I came out with that label.
Yeah, look, I think part of the theme of all of this is everything develops and it grows and it changes as time goes by, right? And we learn, we do certain things, we learn lessons, and hopefully the next iteration is a better iteration, and we move and go up from there. So we're coming up to the end of our time. So I want to take just a few minutes to review some of the key points that I think you've made, so that the people watching this will have an opportunity to maybe embed some of these ideas that you shared with us better in their minds. So one of the first things that I recall you saying is that one of the keys to your success it continues to be Jody. You have a wife, a partner who really supports you and believes in what you're doing and in the professional path that you've chosen. So that I think was a key point. And it occurs to me, and we need to do another show on this. How do you get your partner on board, right? Because that can be a tough sell sometimes. That you have to not be willing, or if you have to know what you really want. If you really want money and wealth, then that's gonna require a particular path. If you want, if fulfillment, professional fulfillment, artistic fulfillment is more important than wealth, so then that might allow you to take another path. A third point I think that you made was you were fortunate enough to have always, in some way or another, have been prepared when opportunity came your way, and in essence, therefore, made your own luck, or you made your luck. And I think the sort of overarching was that you have chutzpah, you have the sort of attitude that you're going to go out there and give it your best shot. And I think you've explained, sometimes you fell flat on your face, but you were willing to get up and brush yourself off and kind of try it again and see if you can do it better the second time. Does that sound like a fair? Have I been a good listener to your to what you've said, and what do you think about those points, and is there anything you would change or add to them?
Yeah, you're a very good listener, Kevin. I can tell you're a rabbi, and I'm just thinking about we've all had this serious challenge of COVID over the last 2 years, and are we gonna? A lot of us have been seriously affected by it, if not health, in terms of health, in terms of our businesses, especially for example, in the restaurant business or other businesses that rely on tourism. It's been pretty much a disaster. And so the question is, how do we get back up? How do we carry on? I've been trying to build my winery in Israel for almost 10 years, and I've been on the verge of success, but the deals have just fallen apart. And then with COVID, like, it all went to hell. And I've just tried to stop worrying about when and how I'm going to succeed, and just I've kind of adopted more of a faith-based approach, in that as long as the desire is there, I'm going to continue to push to achieve my goals. And regardless of whether I succeed or not, I think I said earlier in the show, if you don't make the effort, you're definitely not going to succeed. So, I'm giving it my best shot. I don't get quite as anxious and nervous as I used to when I was a younger man. Maybe that's just because I've got more experience now. Some things do get better with age. That would be wine and maybe common sense. And so, yeah, you got to get up and go for it. I think a lot of young people have a greater challenge of just trying to figure out what they want to go for. That's I've seen that in a lot of young people that I work with or deal with. They're kind of rudderless, and this COVID thing has made them even more rudderless. I don't have any clear-cut answers for what to do about it, but it's just something for us to be aware of.
Well, like you have other times during the show, you've given me the perfect lead-in. So next week, I'm going to be doing a presentation based on the book that I wrote, the 8 Deadly Sins of Job Hunting. And I'm going to be talking about how to develop something called your unique value proposition. And this is a system, if you will, that I created to help military people make the transition from whatever branch they were in, the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, whatever, to civilian life by figuring out 3 key things. And that is, what are they good at? What do they love to do? And what is their demand for in the marketplace? So In order to find either a viable job or a viable business idea, all three of those need to be present. Otherwise, you either have a job that you don't like or you have a really cool hobby. And so I'm going to be talking about that next week. And hopefully that will help some people get a better handle on what it is they really want to do. I think if you'll, pardon me for phrasing this way, perhaps one of the greatest blessings of your life is you've known that. Where it came from is probably a topic for another day, unless you've got a little, 3 or 4 minute anecdote that you can wrap up the show with. But I know I have struggled with knowing what I wanted to do for most of my life. And yes,
I'm raising my hand. I have the 3 minute anecdote.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna turn over the floor to you to wrap up the show.
Okay. So it has not always been that clear to me. Okay. It is, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But when I was making that transition from music to wine, I was unhappy as a musician. And Jody and I were taking a couple of days off in the country somewhere. And when it was time to come back to New York, I knew I had some gigs I didn't want to play. And I said, Jody, I don't know what I can't do this anymore. I can't play these gigs. I'm not happy. And there's a big boulder in the stream going by the house we were staying. I said, I'm getting on that boulder, not getting off the boulder until I figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life, which, everybody would love to know what to do for the rest of their lives. But at least I knew I needed to make a change. So that was good. So I sat on the boulder for about an hour. Nothing happened. I really was like, okay, nothing's happening. Second hour, I started to hear the water whooshing by me, and it was whispering something. And eventually I realized it was whispering wine. That was my eureka moment. I jumped off the rock. I ran to Jody and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a winemaker. I did not get a very positive reception with at that point. However, what I'm saying is, if you know you need to make a change, take the time to think about it. Take the time to meditate on it. Take the time to go to a quiet place and let the water, the wind, the trees, let them talk to you, or God, whatever it is, and you'll find your way.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I'm Kevin Bemmel, host of the Way to Wow show, and my guest has been Jeff Morgan of Covenant Winery. And Jeff, thank you very, very much for joining me today and sharing your thoughts on how people can make money in their lives, especially from a source of passion. And we'll be here live every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So please watch for our social media posts. And if you're on my email list, watch out for an email so you can join us live, and or you can watch the replays on our Facebook channel, the Way to Wow Show channel. I'm sorry, I mean on our YouTube channel. And thank you all for watching. Jeff, thank you so much. Mazel tov on your anniversary, and enjoy the rest of your trip in the Caribbean.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure being on the show. Okay. Sorry, I talked too much. I know.
No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Kevin, I got a lot to say.
Exactly what I wanted you to do.
I'm older than you. I got 18 years more to talk about, than you. So are you 50 yet?
Only 7. I'm 61.
Oh, really? You look 50.
Thank you. It's very kind. That'll hold me in good stead as I look for, Mrs. Bemmel number 3.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I hope that, that worked for you. And